Rolling Stone magazine called her an artist you need to know. Today on our podcast, we're going to be joined by Stephanie Quayle, who grew up on a farm in Montana. Her family raised bison and cattle. She got her first horse when she was 4 years old. Seems like a dream come true. But there was a lot to that upbringing. But the thing she's here to talk about today is surviving toxic relationships. She's not just a country music artist who's charted with songs like Selfish and What You Drinking About. She's got a brand new book out called Why Do We Stay? And she details her story of how she met, fell in love with, and ultimately moved on from a toxic relationship or two, and what it took to get that done. This is going to be a good one if you are somebody who just continually finds yourself in toxic relationships. This could be the episode that changes your life. I'm not even joking. Settle in for a great conversation with Stephanie Quayle on this episode of Learn from People Who Lived It.
In 2009, I was in this long-term relationship. I thought I was going to marry this guy. I was raising his daughter with him. She was 12 at the time of his plane crash when he died. 5 days later, at his public memorial service, I learned I was not the only woman. And then that was confirmed that night.
Looking for no bullshit conversation about mental health? Find Learn from People Who Lived It wherever you get podcasts. Search it using all one word. Learn from People Who Lived It.
Welcome to another episode of Learn from People Who Lived It.
Hey everyone, Stephanie Quayle here, and I am originally from Bozeman, Montana.
Love it. Steph, what story are you here to share today?
Oh man, that we are our greatest advocates. That's
Okay.
my story.
All right. Who do you hope hears this?
My hope specifically is to anyone that think they might be in a toxic relationship, because I think that I'm on the other side, and I feel like my story with glorious expertise can really shed light on a lot of things that we know, but don't know how to identify and put into words.
Sounds good to me. I'm excited to jump into this conversation today, given my background, and want to right away welcome Dr. David Lycan, our resident psychiatrist, to the party. How are you, sir?
Very good, Matthew. It's a pleasure to be here as always.
Yeah, listen, this is going to be a good one today. You know, I was in the radio and television industry for 27 years, and for 27 years, I was introducing artists on the radio just like Stephanie Quayle. And one common through line that I always thought was present with all of these artists was some of these songs sound like they've been there and they've done that. Some of the things that they come to the stage with is really like, yeah, there's plenty of people that write songs written by other people, but some folks, man, they write some really personal songs and they put it out there for people so that they can feel less alone. And what an amazing thing, because that is really one of the big taglines here on Learn from People Who Lived It. Our goal is to help other people feel less alone, encourage you to talk about it, and when you're ready, share your story with us. And so it's really cool to me that we have Stephanie on, because you are a country music artist and you have been all over this great country of ours and performed in front of people. And now you've got a new book, which I'm going to put on the screen for those of you who are watching on our YouTube channel, which is called Why Do We Stay? How My Toxic Relationships Will Help You Find Freedom. And so that's why I'm excited to get into this today, because I'm ready to figure out who this Stephanie woman is that's written all these songs. And so, Steph, welcome to the podcast. How are you feeling? Scale of 1 to 10, getting ready to share some pretty sensitive personal stuff. Where are you landing right now?
I would say I'm about an 8.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, 10 being awesome. I usually resonate at 10 with just my ness. My Stephness, but I do, every time I am a part of a conversation, I'm a little bit more reserved with my exuberance, because I really want to be so intentional with my thoughts and my words. So I think that's where those, I pull back a couple. I'm like, okay, this isn't just talking about a song or a tour. This is This is talking about the real stuff. This is not, there's no surface. So I'm an 8.
I like it. Well, the grade 8 and I are about to dive into the first 10 years of her life. That's where I like to start on this podcast because it gives us such a great lens into who you are, what you're all about. Be prepared. Anything you say can and will be used against you with this guy, Dr. David Lycan. He likes to ask some pretty great questions. So let's jump in, Steph. What does 0 to 10 look like for you? Where'd you grow up? Brothers, sisters, mom, dad dynamic? Like, what does all that look like for you?
Oh, like a Vitamix blender. I born and raised in Bozeman, Montana. My older brother and I were with my mom and dad, and then they split up. I was pretty young. I think I was about 3. And my mom remarried a veterinarian who also had a farm. And so I quickly became this farm kid, had my first horse at age 4, which was pretty tremendous. So when I was thinking about the question of like that time, I was so free and so curious because the world was just wide open. So we raised cattle and bison, and I had this, weekday life on a farm, and then my weekends were with my dad. My dad is an entrepreneur, so he's author, photographer. He had the gun range in my hometown and sold precious metals. So it was a very dynamic childhood. And then my dad married my stepmom when I was 6. So then we became a little bit more blended. I have 2 step siblings, but we've all been together now for a really long time. I think 38 years. I can't do math, but very long. And so my stepsister and my brother are the same age, and my stepbrother and myself are the same age. We're like a month apart. It's kind of fun and wild. So that, as you can imagine, merging 2 families with children was horrendous. It went very poorly initially. And I've always been pretty independent and a bit, I've always kind of beaten my own drum. So after my mom ended up splitting up with my stepdad, I was a little bit on my own. And I've always been the one that kind of stepped in for strangers. This was one of my thoughts as I was preparing for this and like our conversation. And when I think about how I would step in for strangers, I also think about now how I'm stepping in for me.
Took you a minute to get to that place, didn't it?
Oh, let's see. I think I remember the first time I stepped in for a kid. I think I was like 4 or 5. So like 40 years, just a minute.
Yeah.
Just a minute. Yeah.
Dave, do you think any of that, Dr. Dave, do you think any of that has to do with like the way she grew up and the blending of the families and, the divorce and then getting remarried? And like, do you see any patterns there? You got to understand, Stephanie, that Dr. Dave is big on patterns. Do you notice any patterns with people that are typically coming from a place like that?
Well, a question went through my mind right away is, how was your stepmom toward you? Because, if you feel like going there, because I can tell it's a pretty common pattern that stepmoms, when they portray the evil stepmom in cartoons and stuff like that, there's some truth behind that. I've had a lot of stories from people where, the stepmom kind of looked at the stepchildren as an intrusion into their new relationship and really had a hard time even being kind, let alone fully accepting.
Wow. That's the first time I've ever been asked that. And I had the opposite. She was like all embracing.
Fantastic.
And when I think of my stepmom, and I'm now a stepmom, which is she kind of showed me the ropes, right? Just by her action. She's one of my greatest advocates. And she was very early on, which is, I don't have really a memory of her not, which is really special. Stepdad relationship was a little bit more difficult, for sure, because I was protective of my mom and my brothers, and he was great with animals. He was a very talented veterinarian.
Got it. I'm reading through the lines there. You picking up on that too, Dr. Dave?
He's since passed of Lou Gehrig's disease, and I'm being respectful of the deceased.
Yes, I get it. But it doesn't mean that there weren't some things along the way. As I like to say when I'm on the stage, nobody's in therapy because they got too many hugs. So, you know what I mean?
I think it's always a challenge though with blended families because of competing interests. You know,
Yes.
you have two people who have former relationships and children from former relationships that fall in love with each other, and they're trying to nurture that new relationship, but then these other kids are there, and usually the kids are too young to be out on their own. They need love and affirmation and, you know, to feel accepted. And, you know, if you're trying to spend time in this new relationship, the kids can be an extra factor. And if you're not deliberate about trying to include the kids, you know, if you have kind of more of a selfish bent, it doesn't go well for the kids.
Yeah, I think they maybe tried to blend us too quickly, and might have overshot that a little bit because especially my stepsister and I, we're now super close, but at the time it was like, how do we share our parents? And we really struggled with that, you know, like me sharing my dad, she sharing her mom. It's so interesting now, we laugh, but we were so young and just we didn't know what we were doing. We're kids. Yeah.
I want to ask you a question. So my podcast is called Learn from People Who Lived It, because I really think like we have an opportunity to learn from people who have been there, done that. And, you know, you've got people like Dr. Dave who study this stuff their whole life, and they have like a skill set that they bring to the table. But then I also think like people like you and I, just everyday average folks who just go through the shit, like we learn another set of things. And so I wanted to ask you, as it relates to step families, what did you learn from your stepmom that she got right, that she helped plug you in? So like, I guess the question is, what do step parents usually get wrong? And what did yours get right in an effort to help more people get more right?
Oh gosh, that's so great. I'm so glad that this conversation is here, because I think that is, it's so important. What my stepmom got right was she knew that I already had a mom. She was so respectful and kind about the fact that I have my mom, and that she wasn't coming in trying to replace or compete. She just was there in any capacity I needed. And I really, like, as I, you know, fell in love with my husband and his kids, that was something that I just saw as like a big blinking, like, do it like this, because it was such a positive. And when I went to, you know, meet their mom, and I shared that with them, like, I'm not here to replace your mom. You have a great mom, but if you need me, I'm here. Now, they were older. It would be very different if they were littles, you know, but I think that just respect, you know, like, I can't fathom what my life would be like had I not had my stepmom and my step siblings and my half brothers. So like to not look at it with just that holistic, full appreciation of, I can't change that my parents had what they had and what happened, but look at all the beauty that came out of it. I would say that probably there wasn't 100% intentionality about making it great, but they made it the greatest they could. And I think that's the key, is, at least in my case, to stepmom to stepmom, you know, is to really, you know, not be a replacement or try to compete, because I will never be their mom. So why am I going to try to like force myself into things that are just not what they are, you know? And so I really went into that respecting, just the same way that my stepmom respected my mom.
Pick up on that, Dr. Dave.
Yeah. And I think it also allows the relationship to develop naturally. You know, if people come into the picture and then assume a role, and they just assume all the authority that goes with that, and they assume that they're going to be treated with that level of respect, and they haven't done anything to build the relationship and to earn that place, it's conflict all the time. Right. Yeah. So I think kind of hanging back and kind of keeping your expectations moderate and say, you know, look, I'm here. Right. You allow the relationship to develop naturally without forcing it to be a particular thing.
Yeah. That's very right on the money.
All right. Let's keep learning. Your latest album is called On the Edge, and you chronicle your personal experiences with a toxic relationship. And that's the bulk of what we're here to talk about today. Yeah. And so let's go dance in the fire a little bit. Why did you write this book? What was happening in your life that made you have to come and put all of this stuff in a book? Because a lot of people go through shit, Steph, but they don't write a book about it.
Yeah. So a little bit of backstory to get to the reason on the book. In 2009, I was in this long-term relationship. I thought I was going to marry this guy. I was raising his daughter with him. She was 12 at the time of his plane crash when he died. And that was on a Wednesday. I say that with specificity is because 5 days later at his public memorial service, I learned I was not the only woman. And then that was confirmed that night. So as you can imagine, this is 2009, so social media didn't exist like it does today. I have a 12-year-old that is not my daughter, but the closest thing I've ever had to having my own child at that, young age. And I don't really think I grieved in those 5 days, but the trauma and the shock and my version of grief very quickly dissipated by Sunday night. And it was a combination of my family and friends saying, move on, get over him as quickly as you can, which is just like, wait a second, I'm still looking at dental records to confirm it was him with the coroner. And then just the rush and pain and shame that came with everything was a lie. So really, I didn't think I was ever going to share it, let alone like my music. No, I never touched it before doing the On the Edge album. And I thought maybe one day I'd write, some stranger than fiction story via a book and get into it because it was just so stranger than fiction. But what happened with the album, which honestly, you guys, I was ready to pull it the week of because I was, if you were asking me like, how are you on a 1 to 10? How are you feeling about this? I was probably like a 3 or 4. It was terrifying.
Yeah, I'm sure it was.
Because everyone knew me as this like singer, country artist. She's got it all. Like everything's good. And so when I revealed this story through my music, it was kind of a shock to a lot of people because I just had never gone there because it's not really a surface. Like you can't kind of go there. You kind of got to go there. And so I very quickly discovered that I was not unique. So many, predominantly women, reached out and said this happened to me, where they were married and then they lost their loved one and discovered everything was lies or partially, many forms. And, not every marriage, but like across the gambit. I'm just going, this is awful. And also it was kind of permission, like we've just, like you just shared, like permission to be able to talk about the stuff that no one is willing to talk about. People started talking. And I think as we get stronger and get more knowledgeable, then, the bad guys don't waste their time on us. And so with the book, I considered it along the way. And then as the album and podcast and short film came together, I got in a conversation with HarperCollins through a friend, and they wanted to share my story in a bigger way. And initially it was going to be more of a memoir. And then as we discussed it, it's like, but wait, this could be a tool. This could be a guide. This could be a go back to book. This could be, like in my mind, I imagine like, girls and boys like reading it and being like, oh no, okay, I'm good. Or, oh, whoa, hey, I gotta go, gotta run. And that excited me because I didn't want it to be something that wasn't going to be usable for other people's benefit, because I go to all the places in the book. I go to all my darkness. And I'm asking others to not stop. That's not the right, hopefully not avoid themselves. Because when we kind of get into our own stuff, that's when we get the freedom. Yeah. And so my hope is that it will really be a tool for others, because like we're doing right now, I'm the storyteller, you're the expert, right? You're there's the story and the expertise. I think that merge, it's not only validating it was very validating to me to understand I wasn't the problem. There was nothing I could have done to change me more, to make the other person not be a bad person. Mm-hmm. And have someone say, this is what this is called. This is the expert, like this understanding the signs. So that's my hope, right? Now, am I terrified? Yes. Am I because I go to all the places, I talk about my mental health. I talk about wanting to take my life because I was just in so much pain. And it's not that I wanted to die. I just couldn't hurt anymore. And I talk about repeating my patterns because I hadn't done the work. I didn't do the healing. I just was getting over it. And you can't get over something. We have to go through it and do the therapy and do the hard work.
Can I ask you what your patterns were?
My bad picker. I think my biggest pattern personally is potentialization. If that's a word, I was so good at potentializing someone where they could be so obviously unhealthy. But man, if they just got it together, they would be so great. That was a big
love that you said that. I call what you just said. So I do the same thing, Stephanie. And I've been told that I romanticize relationships. That's the word that I've had used for me. Yeah, is like I romanticize relationships, and all across the board. I romanticize relationships with coworkers. I give them the benefit of the doubt when they're clearly not carrying their weight. I romanticize relationships with, women along the way. I mean, I've been with my wife now 20 years, and so that's not the case so much anymore, but that was a big piece of it. And I have a tendency to do that. And I wonder, Dr. Dave, if you have an opinion about people that romanticize these relationships and maybe why we do that.
Yeah, I like that term. That's a really interesting way to look at it. In a way, you're not dealing in reality. Yeah. There's a part of you that's just not accepting what the situation is and trying to make it into something that it's not. If you're not able to view the full situation the way that it actually is, at some point it's going to have to hit the wall. Yeah. There's no way around that. There's different reasons why people get to that point. There's a lot of complex childhood dynamics that usually contribute to that. But learning to recognize that pattern is at least the first step toward finding healing from it. Yeah. Because until you recognize that it's even an issue, that it's even a pattern, you're going to just keep repeating it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and I think the other thing is, if I can jump in real quick, it's growing up the way that you grow up, Stephanie, growing up the way that I did, experiencing this thing with your ex who, you thought you had a relationship, and then you found out he had other relationships. It's like more and more we're starting to step into a place where both things can be true. Like, he might have sincerely loved you, sincerely had a place for you in his heart, and you very well may have seen the very best in him. Just turned out he was also capable of this other side of things. And as I've said now twice, nobody's in therapy because they got too many hugs. So you get into these relationships with people where I have a tendency to see the best in folks, and I really do. I mean, I'm not going to apologize for it. I trust people to a fault because I see their, to use your word, potential. I see what's in there. Yeah. And I just want for it so bad to come out and show itself. But it just never seems to.
The problem is not getting the full picture, right? Yeah. So seeing just the good things and kind of minimizing or kind of pushing aside some of the bad things. Okay. You have to be able to take the whole thing in, and it's especially hard in relationships, I think, because it takes a long time to find somebody that you want to go on a second date with. Mm-hmm. And after you've been dating for a while, it's like, well, we've been together now for a couple months, and do I really feel like starting over again and trying to find somebody else? And so there's sunk time into the relationship and an investment there, and when things aren't 100%, like at what point do you pull the plug on it? So I think there's a natural tendency toward, wanting to believe the best and wanting to minimize some of the negative aspects of it. And in fact, when people have a crush on somebody, right, that initial infatuation stage in the relationship, people are blinded to the negatives. I mean, so that's actually a thing. What I've counseled people before when they're trying to find a mate and they're trying to get into a healthy relationship is to have people around them, good friends or family that they trust, to pull them aside and give them their honest opinion of this person, because in that overly optimistic state, there may be negative things that are clearly a red flag to the people that know you and love you, but you're like, they'll get better. I'm sure, maybe I'm just seeing it wrong. And, but you almost have to allow somebody else kind of a veto power
Right.
if you want to develop a healthy relationship long term.
Does that resonate with you, Stephanie?
Oh, 1,000. It all resonates, and it's I potentialize is kind of now romanticize is a really great. It is so powerful, and I think that I had so many people in my close family that were concerned, that shared their concerns.
Yeah,
and I was one part. You don't understand. He's so great when he's great. Or I would, get isolated because I didn't want to talk to them about the hard stuff. So I would just super guard that part that was very unhealthy, and then just go into, well, I'll get better. I'll do more. I'll be better. And clearly I'm the problem. And it was pointed to me quite a bit. Like in that relationship, it was very much anytime I was questioning him, because my intuition was working. I just was overriding it.
So what were other people seeing?
Their concern was more of, well, I'll say specifically in my dad's case, he was very concerned. I think he saw some of the power dynamics with just, he was older. I was very young. Young-minded and young in my 20s. And whenever my dad would ask me, I think it was my response that gave me away, because it wasn't honest. It was guarded, right? I was making a lot of excuses. And it wasn't until the last summer we were together, I believe, before he passed, my dad reached out to him, actually. He was just to that point of like, I have to do something. And he said, please, if you don't want my daughter, because I don't know that my dad knew, but he knew something wasn't working for him. Just let her go. And that's when this guy doubled down with just love bombing, and I'm going to give you the world, and we're going to get married, and blah, 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 all the things, all the things that in my case, I'd been romanticizing and waiting to hear. And then, I continued to stay. So I talk about that in the book. I didn't leave my first toxic relationship. He died. And that's how I then, really learned how bad it was. And I didn't really know how bad it was until I, got to see it firsthand. And really, I became an investigator after that. I went to go try to figure out all the things, but I didn't do the therapy or the grief counseling or like the work that is so necessary after I became my own, like, I'm like, I'm an investigator. I'm going to get to the bottom of every single person, every single hour that was supposedly one place and it was another place. And, when you say that, you believe the best in people, I do that now, but so differently, because I have become so selfish with my time. And I said this the other night to my husband. I said, we can make more money. We can't make more time. And so when I think about anyone watching or listening to this, it's like, the idea of staying because, well, what if this is as good as one can get? Or, it's easier to stay than to leave. All these things. I just think about myself and going, man, that time I'll never get back. And so the gift of this podcast and this conversation is like, we want others to learn from our stuff so they don't have to go through that stuff and get that time back. And, oh man, if I could just, now I'm here where I am. I'm not going to go regret backwards, but I do think about that time that I can never get back. So my hope is through this book and through these conversations, others get their time back. And then it makes it a little less like, toward myself.
I want to ask you a question, something that's kind of coming up in me right now, which is, so we
Yeah.
had this woman, a neuroscientist on, her name was Nicole Vignola, and she said that basically the brain believes what you tell it. That's this is a short way to put this. And so if you wake up every day and you're looking for the reason that you're a piece of crap, basically all day long, the world will find a way to prove you right. Your brain will look for those things and you'll see it. And so I wonder if here's what's coming through, and you can shake this out with me and David on this thing is,
I love this.
do a lot of people stick around in these toxic relationships because, like you said a few minutes ago, they believe they're the problem, and because they believe they're the problem, again, the brain believes what you tell it. So if you wake up every day and you think you're a piece of crap, you're going to find ways to believe that you're a piece of crap. And then if you think you're a piece of crap, well, then you're not worthy of a better relationship. You're not worthy of trying anything new. It's like, why would I deserve this? I'm broken. Does any of that speak to you and or some of the women that you've talked to along the way, having gone through this journey?
I was so convinced it was me that yes. When you just said what you said about I don't deserve this. When I met my husband, and I remember like driving up to our now house and him coming out of the door, I remember saying to myself, you don't get the good guy. You don't get this guy. Look at where you've been and what you've done. You don't get this guy. And it was such like a break, like I had to break down my own internal systems to get to, I am worthy of a healthy, great, loving relationship that is not highs and lows dramatic, where that is mistaken for a passionate love relationship, right? Like where it's just unhealthy. And I have, through, the women that haven't reached out about the music, and then of course the content of the conversation that is in the book and such, it's pretty common from my experience is, I don't deserve to leave. I'm unworthy of something better. And it's really heartbreaking. Yeah. So I make sure every day I get up and I've got a clear sense of how this day is going to go before it ever comes out of my mouth or, I get out of bed. I'm very, very intentional with everything I say to myself out loud now.
All right. Your turn, Dr. Dave.
What strikes me about that is the risk that people put themselves at is if you feel that you're not worthy of a healthy relationship, if a narcissist picks up on that, they will do, there's a whole bunch of different manipulations between building you up and showering you with love. They call it love bombing, and then you get a little jab and then you get knocked down a little bit. And then you think, oh gosh, okay, like I must have screwed up and I don't want to lose this. This is like the best thing that's ever happened to me. And so that's, if you want to use a fishing analogy, they cast the hook, and once they feel like they have you on the hook, they pull on it a little bit and then let some slack out, right? So it's the love bombing and bring you in real close, and then smack you around a bit and threaten to, take the relationship away from you. And that builds a really toxic dynamic in the relationship. And that fear is what keeps the relationship going, but it's not a mutual relationship, which I think is really the key to a healthy relationship, is giving each other space, that there's, both sides are looking to build up the other person always. It's not this highs and lows, I'll build you up in an exaggerated way and then be abusive and smack you down. I think as soon as you start to see that, then you should be looking for the door.
Okay. I'm going to ask you another question, Dave, and then I'm going to come back to you, Steph. So, Dave, I'm not interested in Houston, we have a problem, and then not giving people some solutions, right? So if somebody's on this podcast and they're like, I'm in a toxic relationship right now, holy shit, everything you guys have just said is totally me. I'm going through this same thing. What are some really practical first steps for somebody to take that's in a relationship that clearly is not serving them any longer?
Holy smokes, not easy.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
then I'm going
because
to ask you, Steph, what you did, but I want to go to the expert first. So
Yeah.
what are some things we can do?
very quietly get a good lawyer.
Okay.
You know, because by the time you're in that relationship, I'm assuming, you know, it's been at least a number of months, maybe a few years. You know, you're sharing financial stuff together. Maybe you have a house together. You know, it's not as easy as just saying, you know what, I'm out and I'm going to, you know, pack my stuff and walk away. And you know, you need to figure out how you're going to be good financially, and you know what your level of support is. So I would say, you know, maybe take an inventory of what your resources are. You know, if you think you're in a toxic relationship, you know, don't necessarily rock the boat right away, but take an inventory of what your resources are, and build yourself up to get ready to exit that relationship if that's what the appropriate thing is.
What did you do, Steph?
With the second one, I had to, well, it was interesting because I was still in some of this, I don't know what the word for it is, but like I had to investigate and be sure of my information because I was still fragile and still so like I didn't have my footing yet internally from the standpoint of like, okay, is this me? Is it me again? I'm repeating this pattern. He's cheating on me, but are these people just making this up? Like who makes that up? It was just such a hodgepodge of emotions because I wasn't aligned and centered in my own stuff. So by the time I got to the place of where I was like, I am leaving, I didn't need a lawyer because we weren't in anything business or financially together, but I went and got myself a place unbeknownst to him because we were living together. And I waited till he was out of the country, till I packed up my stuff and left so I could leave because he was so good at manipulation and he was so good at lying that there were even times where I was present with him and saw the truth unfold before my eyes. And then he would 180 convince whomever else was in the conversation of something entirely different. And I would question myself. And I'd be like, okay, but I was there. And it was such a rattling that, yeah, it was really, really wild. I mean, I got to a very dangerous place personally because I was so distraught about learning about his infidelities. And I didn't go, this idiot. I went, this idiot. I pointed at myself. And that's when I just wanted to get out of pain. And I made a really bad choice and drank, I think, a handle of vodka. And that was a big kind of like, what are you doing for myself?
But I'm thinking, you know, talking yourself out of the situation. And I know a lot of people do that. If I could highlight anything, it would be if something seems like it's not right, it's probably not right.
Yes.
And to not talk yourself out of the situation, but to maybe file it away and look for other, you know, pieces of information to confirm. But you know, it's tough because narcissists are also reading you the entire time. So if you get stung with a piece of misinformation, you know, and wait a second, like that doesn't seem right. They're gonna feel you pulling away, and then they're gonna come after you with, you know, more charm and win you over again. You know, so it's not a one-sided sort of thing.
I have had women that have reached out to me and kind of in that moment of desperation where it's been even more abusive, right? So it's been with a narcissist and all these other things, but it's been physical. And I'm like, I have to get you to professionals because there's so many dynamics going on. And I really appreciate what you said, because in my mind, I'm like such a run, you know, like run. And I appreciate what you said is like, hey, take inventory, be prepared. And I think what I loved about what you said too is be prepared to leave so you don't go back.
Yeah, if it's done, it's done, right? Yeah. I mean, there's got to be room for forgiveness, because in any relationship, people make mistakes, and sometimes people lose their temper, and I've worked a lot with veterans that have problems with anger after deployment, and so they're prone to overreacting and losing their temper, but they don't mean to harm the other person. It's not coming from a manipulative place, or that they're not trying to be, they're not trying to be the toxic person in the relationship, but anger affects other people. So there has to be some room for forgiveness in the situation. But then at some point, though, when patterns come back, and usually they're going to repeat, you have to figure out for yourself, like, where's your done threshold.
Yeah. I think the beauty of it, well, now, right, because I'm becoming an expert in myself, is I now am seeing my triggers to where I get pulled in, where I'm learning where that bait is for me. And one of those things I really am super aware of is in business, because like you, Matthew, I just love people. I just want to see the best in people. I just there's no way they would use their, son who's died to manipulate other people. That would be crazy. People don't do things like that. That's, so I learned very quickly. I was easily manipulated through emotional, now I know they use the term trauma bonding or what, but when, coming out of all this stuff, people got to me through these emotional, oh, my son, he passed away, let's work together, and it was very just convoluted and manipulative, but emotionally. So I've kind of had to firewall myself from, okay, this is business. This is, heart things that I just do because I want to give and contribute. And I've had to really define my own boundaries for myself, because that bait was coming at me left and right.
So a question I want to walk through with you guys, and I may get a little shit for this, but whatever. There's a parable that I love, and I'll give you guys just the gist of it. But the parable is, it was a Vietnamese Buddhist monk who was captured during a war, and he was put into basically like a camp where they were torturing some of these people. And years later, he was doing an interview, and they asked him what was the hardest part of that experience. And everybody expected him to talk about the torture and all the things that they did to him. But the monk answered, the scariest moment for me was the moment where I almost lost my compassion for these people that were harming me.
Wow.
And there's something really beautiful about that thought, because these folks who hurt us, these guys who are abusive, these people who are cheating on their spouses all the time, they're clearly in a lot of pain themselves. They're clearly not operating the way that they're supposed to be either. And I just don't subscribe to the thought that everybody's an asshole. Like, I really think people just make mistakes based on the way that they were raised and their environment and the things that they've come to know. And so I'm just curious, have you been able to look back on those former relationships that were toxic with a compassionate heart towards that person? Or do you not allow yourself that time and space because of what they did to you?
Compassion is probably the most powerful word, because, and remind me to go back to the first time I felt compassion for someone that I loathed. It's very interesting, and Dr. Dave will be all over it. But specifically with Paulo, which is the one that passed away in the plane crash, last January, so that would have been, I think, 14 years. On January 28th, I had this revelation that I hadn't forgiven him. And in the sense that, I was with his daughter in those moments and leading up to, and I've been in her life ever since. And as much as I was so crushed by what he did to me, I always kept in my mind the fact that that's still her dad. I always kept that between us. I was very protective of that for her, because of course it's her father. And I agree that everyone is just coming with so much stuff. I don't think it's like, okay, today I'm going to be a rotten human being. And so as I did the work and wrote the book, the comeback really that turned, and it's not indifference. It's really like what he must have gone through to get to a place where he felt safe, which I can't fathom, in this web of, I mean, I can think it's just, he must have been so tired because he was having to keep track. I mean, the thing about the truth is you don't have to remember it, right? He just like, it just is. And so I have real compassion for him. I actually saw his mom recently, and I hadn't seen her since the funeral 15 years ago. And that was really wild and really precious. And I think that's what comes with healing, right? Where you just you can see through a lens of compassion. And I'm on the other side. So I don't know, had you asked me 4 years ago, 3 years ago, if I would have the same answer, but that's my answer now. And with Toxic 2, we call him the prince in the book. I ran into him and his fiance, and I didn't feel anything that was anything other than just, what a wild deal this whole living thing is, like it's just life. And so it didn't have that hold, which was really interesting. With the business relationship I talk about in the book, that one's harder for me. He left his wife and his 4 children with just such a mess. And I think he's still on the run. And just like, and that was one of those situations where I was easily in danger and had no idea. I just, again, was so erring on the side of trusting. So I don't know how I feel about him. I don't know that I feel anything. I might be indifferent with that one.
Yeah, for now, right? Like you said, like there was probably a time when you thought this about the other two. And I'm so happy with your answer, because Dr. Dave and I have a 6-week online course that we've created for people to go through. And one of the weeks is forgiveness. Yeah. And we're really clear about it. Like for some people, it feels like an impossible task to be able to forgive them. But at a minimum, start to think about what could a path to forgiveness look like. Just entertain that thought. And so, Dave, I'll let you kind of double down on some of the things she said.
Indifference is fine. You're still not giving them space in your head.
Correct.
Right? But, really the forgiveness and the compassion part is for you. The risk of being harmed in a relationship is that you harden off and you never allow yourself to get close to other people again. Or there's always this guarded quality to where you don't invest yourself in relationships, and you never, get to experience what it's like to be in a truly loving and close relationship. So, so on the one side is the hardening off part, but on the other side, you can't allow yourself to be vulnerable and taken advantage of, right? So finding that middle ground of maybe learning from the experience and figuring out like what are the signs as early as possible to pull the plug on it. But the forgiveness piece is very important.
One of the things I wonder about with your course, that this is something that I just discovered this last year. So I forgave, Paula, it was January of last year. And, music's coming, healthy family, everyone's good, everything's good. Why am I so angry? And I hit, like it was like a flip of a switch the summer of last year. And I couldn't put my finger on it. It was making me like, what is going on? Like, you have nothing to be angry about. And then I realized that I hadn't forgiven myself. And then I went into, okay, this is, I don't know if it's the last thing, but it became like, okay, I've got to figure this out. And as I found my way to my own forgiveness, it was just like, oh, yeah, because so much shame has been, airplanes full. If those bags were filled with shame, I've been carrying them for so long. And that really just rocked my world in such a powerful way, to just be like, hey, I forgive you. Stephanie, and let's move forward. And that my word for
That's
this year has
awesome.
been alignment. I just want my insides and my outsides to match, right? I don't want to be like, oh, hi, everything's great. And then inside be tormented, or, you know what I mean? Or vice versa. I think I just want to be aligned.
Well, you just gave the definition of integrity. The word integrity means the same throughout. So like, think of like a lump of cookie dough. Whoops, I just kicked my mic here. Wherever you slice it, it's going to be the same.
Ooh, I like that.
What's cool about what you get to do, Stephanie, is that you're a creative person. And so you have an outlet for some of these feelings, and you have a place to put some of these feelings. And so, Dave, I'm going to give you the final word as we come down here. Yeah. For folks who don't have their own podcast, they don't have their own, country music career, they don't have some sort of a creative outlet where they can unload these things. Instead, they keep bagging, piling it on themselves. What could be, from your vantage point, some great places to start unloading some of that stuff that they've been carrying on?
Everybody can have a creative outlet through journaling.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can start a journal and start writing your thoughts down. And it's interesting to come back to that 6 months later, a year later. And when you've made some progress and you've made some improvement, to look back at where your headspace was at that previous time, and be able to measure your growth. When it comes to developing a healthy self-image, being able to actually measure your progress and to have, confirmation that, wow, I am growing, I am improving. Journaling is a good way to do that. It's also a release, because if you're feeling intense emotions and you don't know what to do with it, and you don't know who you can share it with, taking the time to sit down, compose your thoughts, write them out. It helps you to kind of organize your thinking and kind of index what's going through your mind in a way that you can use that information then later.
1000% agree.
Yeah. So the latest album is called On the Edge. The book is called Why Do We Stay? And you get the final question, Stephanie, which is, as you wrote this book, there are chapters that are easier than others to write. What was the chapter for you that gave you the most anxiety to put on the pages? Probably because you knew it was the thing that was the most real, honest part of this whole deal that would genuinely help somebody. So what was that? Does anything jump off to you as I ask you that question?
Yeah, I mean, I think me talking about the fragility that I put my own life in, there's a couple different points in the book where it was New Year's Eve, and we'd all been drinking, and I watched my guy go and start hitting on a woman right in front of me, and I had a little bit more courage. And so when I confronted him about it, he handed me some drugs, and he said, "Go take these. Don't ruin this night." And I put my life in total jeopardy because, again, I was at fault. And that word ruin, ooh, there's certain words now, like you're like, oh yeah, feel that. And so I remember going to the bathroom and, taking these, I don't even know what I took. I still don't know. And I've asked his friends to kind of understand, like, what were we doing? Because it was very dangerous. And, they probably should have called the cops to, get my stomach pumped. But I just remember looking in the mirror and just saying to myself, like, once all the other girls were out of the bathroom, like, don't you ruin this. And I was just, and I think that just breaks my heart for this, gosh, I think I was 28 at the time, just this young woman thinking that was going to solve anything, right? So that was really hard to write about, because it exposes so much of me. And that's what this book really does. It's not like this guy did this wrong and this guy, I mean, I'm complicit because I made the choices. I was the one to stay and I was the one to leave. And I want to own that so others can own theirs, right? And it not feel like we can't talk about things like this. And then the other was the night that I drank, to where I said, I just don't want to hurt anymore. And when they called, the suicide prevention for a wellness check, and that whole conversation just became so much more real. So as I was writing it, I don't think I ever did. I think as I was writing the book, I realized like this was very traumatic. And I don't think I ever gave it the time or really like myself a moment to go, this is real shit. And you're allowed to take a minute and work your way through to the other side. And that's not shameful, that's brave.
We have 3 goals with Learn from People Who Lived It. 1, to help you feel less alone. 2, encourage you to seek out a coach, a therapist, a church, anyone who can help you get through your journey and find some healing. 3, when you're ready, share your story with us.
Find Learn from People Who Lived It wherever you get podcasts. Search it using all one word. Learn from People Who Lived It.